Command log entry 47,291. Galactic standard date 2387.156.78. This is Fleet Commander Vix Thanul of the Crimson Devastation Corps, and I am officially requesting immediate psychiatric evaluation. Not for my troops, they're fine. Well, they're not fine, but they're not broken in any way that makes military sense. I need psychiatric evaluation for myself, because what I'm about to report will make every strategic analyst in the galaxy question whether reality itself has been drinking too much fermented Crixian nectar and decided to play practical jokes on the fundamental laws of warfare. We are the soldiers who conquered Kethmarak, where gravity flows upward and the trees grow into the planet's core like some cosmic middle finger pointed at physics. We are the warriors who survived Grixthal Prime, where the rain falls from the ground to the sky and somehow still manages to drown you because apparently water doesn't read the same textbooks as the rest of us. We have literally fought on 50 Deathworlds that would make a neutron star look like a pleasant vacation resort for elderly tourists. But 6 hours ago, we encountered something that has left my most battle-hardened veterans sitting in corners staring at walls and occasionally muttering things like, "But that's not how military doctrine works," and "Why did they use a spatula as a defensive weapon?" And Commander, I think I might be developing feelings. Let me be perfectly clear about something that will probably get me committed to the Galactic Institute for Commanders who've lost their minds. We didn't lose to an army. We didn't lose to a fleet. We didn't lose to some ancient superweapon or cosmic horror from beyond the stars that devours sanity for breakfast. We lost to exactly 3 humans. 3, not 3,000, not 300, not even 3 dozen 3. As in the number that comes after 2 and before 4, the same 3 that represents the absolute minimum number of beings required to form what humans apparently call a committee. Senior tactical analyst Krexnul keeps insisting that there must have been more of them hiding somewhere, possibly in extra-dimensional pockets or quantum storage units. Perhaps they had cloaking technology, he keeps shouting, while rocking back and forth in what appears to be a therapeutic motion. Perhaps they had dimensional reinforcements. But no, the orbital scanners confirmed it. 3 heat signatures, 3 heartbeats, 3 beings who apparently decided that the laws of warfare were more like gentle suggestions written by someone's well-meaning but ultimately naive grandmother. The psychological evaluation team has been working overtime trying to understand what happened to my troops. Dr. Thixilman, the same psychiatrist who successfully treated PTSD symptoms in veterans of the backwards time war, where you have to fight battles before you understand why you're angry, just sent me a report that consists entirely of question marks and what appears to be a drawing of a very confused-looking stick figure surrounded by question clouds. Let me start from the beginning, because if I don't document this properly with obsessive attention to detail, the War College is going to think I've been experimenting with recreational psychotropic substances and decided to write military fiction instead of actual reports. Crixvol the Bone Crusher, veteran of the screaming caverns of Morthek, where he single-handedly held off entire hordes of crystalline death spiders that could cut through battle armor with their angry, chittering sounds, was found 3 hours ago trying to hide inside a supply crate, clutching what appeared to be a recipe for something called emergency comfort. Food, and whispering things like they made soup out of our invasion plans, actual soup, with vegetables and what I think might have been love. Love. He thinks they put love in the soup. Crixvol, the Bone Crusher, who once described affection as a tactical weakness exploited by enemies to make you hesitate before killing them efficiently, now believes in love-based cooking. Thump the Devastator, survivor of the Backwards Day massacre on Flip This, where time flows in reverse, and you have to fight battles before you know why you're fighting them, which requires a very special kind of mental flexibility that most beings don't possess. hasn't stopped trembling since the encounter, but it's not the terrified trembling of someone who's experienced trauma. It's the trembling of someone who's been emotionally moved by something they can't adequately explain. She keeps muttering something about tactical napkins and weaponized politiness and the strategic application of genuine concern for other people's well-being. I don't even know what weaponized politiness means, but apparently it's devastatingly effective against hardened military veterans. And Kelnara, the Void Walker, the same Kelnara who once killed a mountain by staring at it aggressively until it developed severe self-esteem issues and collapsed from emotional distress, is currently engaged in what appears to be an intense philosophical debate with a toaster in the mess hall. Every few minutes, I hear her shout things like, "But toast doesn't have military applications," and "No, I will not accept that butter is a valid defense strategy," and "How can something so simple be so emotionally satisfying?" The toaster, for its part, appears to be winning the argument through strategic silence and the occasional production of perfectly browned bread products. Now, you might be wondering, and this is a perfectly reasonable question that I've been asking myself repeatedly while consuming increasing quantities of stress relief medication. How did the most feared military force in 3 galaxies end up in this state? How did soldiers who've conquered Deathworlds, where the AIR is poisonous, the water is on fire, the ground tries to eat you, and the local wildlife considers existence itself to be a personal insult, get psychologically destroyed by 3 humans on a relatively peaceful planet that most star charts describe as mostly harmless with occasional patches of mild confusion? Enter my dear colleagues at Military Command, who are probably reading this report while consuming large quantities of whatever passes for alcohol in your respective species, is both simple and completely insane in a way that defies conventional logic. We made the mistake of attacking them during their lunch break. But I'm getting ahead of myself. And if I don't explain this properly, with adequate context and extensive background information, you're going to think I've been hallucinating this entire experience. Let me explain how we even found this cursed place that appears to operate according to completely different rules than the rest of the universe. The intelligence reports described Earth as a minor backwater planet inhabited by primitive bipeds with delusions of competence and an unfortunate tendency to argue about trivial matters while their planet slowly destroys itself through willful ignorance and aggressive stupidity. The strategic assessment classified it as threat level negligible, suitable for training exercises and psychological rehabilitation for soldiers suffering from excessive confidence. The cultural analysis concluded with, inhabitants appear to spend most of their time arguing about trivial matters, consuming fermented plant matter, and creating entertainment based on watching other beings experience simulated misfortune. What the reports failed to mention, and I'm beginning to suspect our intelligence division needs to be completely reorganized from the ground up, was that these primitive bipeds have a disturbing tendency to treat everything like it's perfectly normal, including massive alien invasions, interdimensional anomalies, and apparently the complete breakdown of established military protocol. We approached their planet with our standard intimidation formation, Omega-7, 47 dreadnoughts, each one capable of cracking moons like nuts and turning entire continents into fashionable crater jewelry. Our ships blotted out their sun like a cosmic eclipse of pure intimidation. Our weapons arrays were primed and ready to demonstrate why the Crimson Devastation Corps has never met a tactical problem that couldn't be solved through the generous application of overwhelming firepower. The Psychological Warfare Division was broadcasting our most terrifying war chants, the same ones that made the entire population of Grilthex surrender before we even landed, and caused the warrior monks of Yithgalon to declare us too scary for honorable combat. The human response? One of them came on the communication channel, and I want you to understand the significance of this. One person, apparently speaking for their entire species, and said, "Oh, hey there, you folks seem to be blocking our satellite TV signal, and that's creating what we call a domestic crisis situation. Mine's scooting over a bit, the game's about to start, and Bob gets cranky when he misses kickoff. We're talking seriously cranky here, like he starts reorganizing the kitchen cabinets by height instead of function, and nobody wants to deal with that kind of chaos. Bob. Not Supreme Leader Bob, or General Bob the Terrible, or Admiral Bob of the Cosmic Defense Force, or even Bob the Reasonably Competent. Just Bob, like he was their neighbor asking to borrow a cup of sugar because he was making cookies and had miscalculated his ingredient requirements. Domestic crisis. They considered our massive invasion fleet to be a domestic inconvenience, comparable to poor television reception. Fleet Admiral Gix Mortal, veteran of 100 campaigns across 50 star systems, and survivor of the Great Screaming War, where battles are conducted entirely through interpretive dance and aggressive musical performances, spent the next 15 minutes trying to explain that we were here to conquer their pathetic world and demonstrate the overwhelming superiority of the Crimson Devastation Corps, only to be told, "Oh, that's nice, dear. Really appreciate the advance warning. But could you do it after dinner? We're having meatloaf tonight and it gets all soggy if you reheat it." Plus, Rodriguez spent all afternoon making his grandmother's famous cornbread, and it would be a shame to let that go to waste. You're welcome to join us if you want. There's plenty. Meatloaf, not we must defend our homeworld to the death, not never shall we surrender to alien oppression, not even we challenge you to honorable combat according to the ancient traditions of our warrior ancestors. Meatloaf, and an invitation to dinner. The Psychological Warfare Division immediately declared a complete systems failure and requested emergency counseling, stress leave, and what their report described as intensive therapy to process the cognitive dissonance created by enemies who invite you to dinner instead of declaring eternal warfare. But we pressed on because we are professionals with standards and a reputation to maintain across multiple galaxies. We selected what appeared to be a small military installation, barely visible from orbit and obviously designed by someone with no understanding of proper defensive architecture, as our demonstration target. Something to show these humans that we meant business, a quick, decisive strike that would break their spirit and force immediate surrender, followed by the establishment of a proper military government that understood the importance of intimidating fortress walls. The base didn't even look like a proper military installation. There were no towering fortress walls designed to make enemies feel inadequate. No massive weapons emplacements bristling with destructive potential. No threatening signs warning of imminent death to all intruders. No defensive moats filled with dangerous creatures or toxic substances. Just a few simple buildings that looked like they'd been designed by someone whose primary concern was functional comfort rather than strategic intimidation. There were vehicles parked outside that appeared to be used for transportation rather than warfare, and what appeared to be a garden with flowers and what might have been vegetables growing in neat little rows. What kind of military installation grows flowers? What possible tactical advantage could be gained from vegetable cultivation? Were they planning to defeat enemies through aggressive horticulture? Our scouts reported exactly 3 heat signatures inside the primary structure. 3, the same number as the fingers on a Thrixian hand, the same number as the fundamental vertices of a basic geometric triangle. Clearly, this would be a simple matter of overwhelming force meeting minimal resistance. A textbook example of superior numbers and advanced technology defeating primitive defenders. We deployed our finest troops, a full assault squadron of 75 elite warriors, each one a veteran of multiple Deathworld campaigns and survivor of training regimens that would make nightmare creatures wake up in cold sweats. These were soldiers who had fought through the screaming forests of Yith-Golon, where the trees throw rocks at you and the flowers try to bite your ankles. Warriors who had survived the upside-down rain war on Plivnexus, where you have to fight while standing on the ceiling and everything falls in the wrong direction. Veterans who had conquered the singing deserts of Morthek Prime, where the sand forms itself into aggressive musical compositions that attack you with weaponized harmony. They approached the human installation with standard tactical formation, weapons primed and ready for immediate violence, battle cries properly rehearsed, death glares appropriately focused, and the sort of professional intimidation that had served them well across dozens of successful campaigns. And that's when everything went completely, utterly, impossibly wrong in ways that violated every principle of military science ever discovered. The first human they encountered, later identified through extensive intelligence gathering as Sergeant Murphy, looked up from what appeared to be a sandwich of significant architectural complexity and said, "Oh, visitors, come in, come in. Coffee's fresh, but watch out for the step there. Jenkins still hasn't fixed it, and I swear that boy couldn't find his own tail if it was painted fluorescent green and equipped with emergency lighting. Fair warning, though, the coffee's stronger than usual today." Rodriguez got a little enthusiastic with the measurements, and honestly, I think it might be approaching industrial strength. Coffee! He offered them coffee. Not surrender terms, not desperate pleas for mercy, not even basic acknowledgement that they were heavily armed alien warriors who had come to conquer his world. Coffee. As if 75 armed alien warriors were just neighbors dropping by for a social visit and some casual conversation about local news and weather conditions. Krixvol later told me, and this is a direct quote from his debriefing session, that this was the exact moment when military protocol began to dissolve like sugar in acid rain during a particularly aggressive thunderstorm. You see, in all of our combat training, across every Deathworld scenario, through countless tactical simulations and strategic exercises, we had prepared for hatred, fear, anger, desperation, rage, panic, heroic last stands, desperate bargaining, and even bizarre incompetence that defied logical explanation. But we had never, and I cannot stress this enough with sufficient emphasis, never prepared for aggressive hospitality delivered with genuine enthusiasm and what appeared to be sincere concern for our general well-being. But surely, you're thinking, and this is a perfectly reasonable response that demonstrates sound logical thinking, even the most polite greeting couldn't derail an entire military operation conducted by professional soldiers with extensive training. Oh, my naive colleagues at command, who have clearly never encountered humans operating at maximum hospitality capacity. You have no idea what these beings consider normal social interaction. Sergeant Murphy, still holding his sandwich, mind you, as if nothing unusual was happening, began what he cheerfully described as the grand tour for our distinguished guests. He walked our bewildered warriors through their facility, pointing out various rooms and explaining their functions, with the casual enthusiasm of someone showing off their personal hobby collection to interested visitors. "This here's our communications room. That red button there starts the coffee maker, but don't touch the blue one. Jenkins hit it last week and somehow managed to order 47 tons of hamburger buns from a supplier 3 star systems away. We're still finding creative ways to use them. Yesterday, Rodriguez made what he called emergency bread sculptures, and honestly, they're not bad. Very artistic. We're thinking of starting a gallery. And this is our armory. Mind the boxes there, that's Corporal Rodriguez's grandmother's recipes. She sends them weekly with detailed instructions and enough spices to supply a small restaurant. The woman thinks we're all dying of starvation and cultural deprivation. Last week she included instructions for something called 7-layer death casserole. The name's accurate, but in a good way, very satisfying. Makes you understand why humans have survived as a species despite their apparent lack of basic survival instincts. Our soldiers, trained to identify threats and tactical weak points, found themselves instead receiving detailed information about meal planning, maintenance schedules, and what Murphy described as the ongoing saga of our battle with rebellious kitchen appliances. Several of them later reported feeling strangely comfortable and oddly concerned about the condition of Jenkins's vitamin intake and Rodriguez's grandmother's persistent worry about their nutritional status. The tour continued with Sergeant Murphy explaining their daily routines, their minor equipment malfunctions, and their ongoing attempts to get their television reception working properly during what he called weather situations that seemed personally offended by our attempts to watch our favorite programs. "See, the thing about Earth weather," he continued, apparently completely unaware that he was addressing a heavily armed invasion force equipped with weapons capable of leveling entire cities, is that it's got no respect for technology. Last Tuesday's storm knocked out our communications for 3 hours. Do you know how boring it gets around here without our soap operas? Rodriguez nearly went insane, started organizing the supply closet by color instead of function. It was absolute chaos. We had red items mixed with blue items. It took us days to sort everything back to proper functionality. By this point, several of our most hardened veterans were nodding sympathetically and offering advice about antenna positioning, backup power systems, and alternative entertainment options for future weather-related technological disasters. Vex Thul, the Mind Ripper, veteran of the psychic warfare campaigns on Zith-Golon, where battles are fought entirely through aggressive telepathy and really intense staring contests, actually suggested that they try board games as emergency entertainment backup, and spent several minutes explaining the strategic complexity of something called chess, which he had apparently learned during a previous cultural exchange mission. Cultural exchange. They were turning our invasion into a cultural exchange program. That's when the second human appeared, and if I thought the situation couldn't get more bizarre, I was about to learn that the universe has an unlimited capacity for situations that defy logical explanation. Corporal Jenkins, a lanky individual who seemed to approach everything with the casual confusion of someone who had just woken up from a very strange dream and wasn't entirely sure whether he was still sleeping, wandered into the room carrying what appeared to be a toolbox and looking mildly perplexed about something that apparently required immediate attention. "Hey, Sarge," he said, apparently not noticing the 75 alien warriors now crowding their facility like some kind of intergalactic social gathering. "I think I might have accidentally fixed the toaster, but now the microwave's making that weird humming sound again. You know, the one that sounds like a dying whale with sinus problems. Should I hit it with the hammer, or do you think it needs the gentle approach this time?" "Try the gentle approach first," Murphy replied, still maintaining his role as gracious host while somehow simultaneously managing what appeared to be a complex equipment maintenance situation. "If that doesn't work, then we'll break out the emergency hammer, the one Jenkins specially calibrated for microwave-related percussive maintenance." Emergency hammer. They had classifications for their hammers. They had developed specialized tools for hitting appliances with scientific precision. Jenkins nodded sagely, as if this conversation made perfect sense in the context of normal human behavior, then seemed to finally notice the crowd of alien visitors filling their facility. Instead of panic, alarm, surprise, or even mild concern about the obvious security implications, his face lit up with what appeared to be genuine delight and enthusiastic welcome. "Oh, wow! Are you guys here for the inspection?" because I have to tell you, I'm really sorry about the state of the barracks. Rodriguez went through what he calls his creative reorganization phase last month, and honestly, I'm not sure anyone knows where anything is anymore. He color-coded everything, but then decided that the color system didn't properly represent the emotional significance of various items, so he reorganized by what he calls sentimental value, which is apparently a very complex system that only he understands. But the coffee's good, and Murphy's got stories that'll make your tentacles curl in the best possible way. Tentacles curl. He was making jokes about our anatomy, not mocking jokes designed to insult or intimidate, friendly jokes, as if we were all old buddies sharing amusing anecdotes about our weird relatives and embarrassing childhood memories. At this point, Senior Battle Coordinator Thexival, veteran of the Great Screaming War, where battles are conducted entirely through interpretive dance and aggressive musical performances that can literally shatter enemy morale, sent me an emergency communication that simply read, "Commander, I believe we may have made a fundamental tactical error. These humans appear to be conducting some form of advanced psychological warfare that our training did not cover. They're being nice to us. I don't know how to respond to sustained niceness. Request immediate strategic guidance and possibly some kind of manual for dealing with enemies who offer refreshments." But it got worse. So much worse that I'm still not sure my mental faculties have fully recovered from the complete cognitive overload. The third human, Corporal Rodriguez, appeared from what Murphy had previously described as the kitchen where miracles happen and occasionally small explosions that we don't talk about because they're usually Jenkins's fault. He was carrying a tray laden with steaming cups and what appeared to be baked goods, actual baked goods. Homemade baked goods that smelled like heaven and looked like they'd been prepared by someone who considered food preparation to be a form of artistic expression. Baked goods in the middle of an alien invasion, during what should have been a tactical situation requiring immediate military response. "Gentlemen," Rodriguez announced with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for victory celebrations or the discovery of lost treasure, "I've got fresh coffee and my grandmother's famous empanadas. Fair warning, though, she put some kind of secret ingredient in them that she claims is love, but I'm pretty sure is actually enough garlic to kill a small moon. Also, there might be some experimental spices in there. Grandmother's been getting creative lately, and last week's batch had what she called mysterious flavor enhancers that turned out to be some kind of rare herbs she ordered from a catalog that she refuses to let us see." He began distributing food and beverages to our assault team, as if they were honored guests at a social gathering, rather than an armed invasion force equipped with enough firepower to level several city blocks. And here's the part that still makes my brain stalks twitch with confusion and what might be early symptoms of a complete psychological breakdown. Our soldiers accepted them. They actually took the food and beverages. They thanked him in multiple languages. Some of them even complimented his presentation. Thump, the Devastator, the same warrior who once ate nothing but combat rations for 6 months while besieging the fortress of infinite screaming, where the walls themselves try to drive you insane through constant exposure to aggressive architecture, took a cup of coffee and an empanada, sampled both with the careful attention of a professional food critic, and then spent the next 15 minutes discussing seasoning techniques with Rodriguez, as if they were colleagues comparing professional expertise. "The secret," Rodriguez was explaining with the passionate intensity of someone discussing matters of life and death, "is that you've got to let the flavors get to know each other. You can't just throw everything together and hope for the best. Cooking's like warfare. It's all about timing, preparation, and making sure everyone's working together instead of against each other. You need strategy, you need coordination, and you need to trust your ingredients to do their jobs. Cooking, like warfare." He was using military metaphors to describe food preparation, and our soldiers were nodding in agreement as if this made perfect tactical sense. Meanwhile, Sergeant Murphy had somehow organized our entire assault team into what he called a proper coffee circle, and was regaling them with stories about their daily life at the base, their personal histories, and what he described as the ongoing saga of our battle against malfunctioning equipment and the forces of mechanical chaos. "So there we were," Murphy continued, gesturing dramatically with his coffee cup. "Rodriguez, Jenkins and me, trying to figure out why the shower in Building C keeps making that sound like a dying whale with severe emotional problems. Jenkins thinks it's a problem with the water pressure. Rodriguez thinks it's ghosts. I think it's because Jenkins tried to improve the plumbing system with spare parts from the old radio equipment and somehow created a hybrid technology that operates according to principles that don't exist in any engineering manual. It could be ghosts," Jenkins protested from across the room, where he was apparently demonstrating proper hammer technique to a group of fascinated alien warriors who seemed genuinely interested in learning about percussive maintenance methodologies. "This base is old, lots of history here. Wouldn't surprise me if some old soldier's spirit decided to take up residence in our plumbing and start making editorial comments about our water usage habits. The only spirit in our plumbing," Rodriguez called back, while continuing to serve refreshments to increasingly relaxed alien invaders, "is the spirit of Jenkins's questionable engineering decisions and his persistent belief that any problem can be solved by hitting it with the right kind of hammer applied at the correct angle." And our soldiers were laughing. Actually laughing. These were warriors who had faced horrors that would make nightmares weep with existential despair, and they were giggling like younglings at a comedy performance. They were sharing their own stories about mechanical failures and engineering disasters from their various homeworlds. They were bonding over shared experiences with malfunctioning equipment. Krexnall the Terrorbringer started telling a story about the time he tried to fix a communications array on Grixthal Prime and accidentally created what he called a trans-dimensional radio that could only receive broadcasts from alternate realities where everyone speaks in rhyming couplets. The humans found this hilarious and wanted to know if he still had the technical specifications. That's when I realized we were facing something far more dangerous than any superweapon, cosmic horror, or advanced military technology. We were facing humans who were genuinely, completely, utterly nice to us without any apparent agenda or ulterior motive. But the true insanity was just beginning, and I'm not sure my psychological resilience was properly prepared for what happened next. Jenkins, having apparently decided that our soldiers needed better entertainment than stories about plumbing ghosts and interdimensional radio equipment, disappeared for a few minutes and returned with what he called the emergency entertainment supplies for unexpected social situations. This turned out to be a collection of games, board games, card games, something called charades, which seemed to involve elaborate physical comedy and interpretive gestures, something else called 20 questions, which Jenkins described as mental warfare but fun and educational, and several other activities that apparently represented what humans consider normal recreational pursuits. Before I knew what was happening, my elite assault team had been divided into small groups, each engaged in different recreational activities with their human hosts. Recreational activities during what was supposed to be a military operation. Group 1 was playing something called Monopoly with Rodriguez, who kept apologizing for the cutthroat nature of property development, while simultaneously bankrupting alien warriors with the ruthless efficiency of a trained economist who had studied the art of financial warfare. He was apologizing while destroying them, and they seemed to be enjoying it. Group 2 had been drawn into a card game called Go Fish with Jenkins, who seemed to have an uncanny ability to remember exactly which cards everyone was, holding while maintaining an expression of complete innocence and what appeared to be genuine surprise at his own success. Several of our soldiers accused him of telepathic abilities, but he just laughed and said he had a good memory for fish-related information. Group 3 was attempting to play charades with Sergeant Murphy, which involved our warriors trying to act out concepts like interdimensional warfare and the heat death of the universe through interpretive gestures, while Murphy made increasingly creative guesses that demonstrated either impressive imagination or a fundamental misunderstanding of cosmic physics. "Ooh, oh, is it?" A very angry butterfly having an existential crisis about the nature of reality? The warrior in question, Vexthal the Mind Ripper, veteran of psychological warfare campaigns, just stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly and sat down with what appeared to be genuine respect for Murphy's deductive abilities and creative interpretation skills. And somehow, in the middle of all this recreational chaos, the humans continued their normal daily routines as if hosting an alien invasion. Force was just another Tuesday afternoon activity. Murphy excused himself to check on the dinner situation, which apparently involved extensive negotiations with what he called the oven that has trust issues and a personal vendetta against anyone who tries to cook anything more complex than toast. Jenkins wandered off to have another go at the broken television, which seemed to involve hitting various electronic devices with different tools until they either started working or made interesting noises that could be classified as either progress or expensive mistakes. Rodriguez continued providing snacks and beverages while simultaneously maintaining what he called quality control, tasting everything multiple times to make sure it meets grandmother's standards and doesn't contain any accidental ingredients that might cause interdimensional side effects. It was like watching a perfectly choreographed dance where everyone knew their steps except us. We were the only ones who seemed confused by what was happening. Hours passed, actual hours. Our swift surgical strike had somehow become an extended social visit with recreational activities and ongoing cultural exchange. My soldiers were learning human recipes. They were sharing stories about their home worlds. They were getting relationship advice. They were discussing career choices. They were bonding over shared experiences with difficult relatives. Kelnara, the Void Walker, spent 47 minutes discussing her romantic difficulties with Rodriguez, who listened with the patience of a trained counselor and offered suggestions that apparently made perfect sense to someone who could kill mountains with aggressive staring and focused disapproval. "The thing is," Rodriguez was saying, while somehow simultaneously managing the snack distribution and providing relationship counseling, relationships are like cooking. You can't just throw random ingredients together and expect magic to happen. You need the right balance, proper timing, and sometimes you have to let things simmer for a while before you know if it's going to work out. Plus, you need to be willing to adjust the recipe based on how things are developing. Flexibility is key. Kelnara was taking notes, actual notes, in a military notebook that she was supposed to be using for tactical observations. That's when the real disaster struck, and I use the word disaster in the sense of complete strategic collapse, rather than anything involving actual destruction or loss of life. Sergeant Murphy returned from the kitchen with an announcement that sent our entire operation into complete psychological meltdown and strategic confusion. "Gentlemen," he called out, and somehow everyone, human and alien alike, turned to listen with the attention usually reserved for important military briefings or emergency announcements. "I've got good news and bad news. The good news is that dinner's ready and Rodriguez's grandmother's recipe for her famous 3-alarm chili turned out perfectly. The bad news is that we're going to need more chairs, more plates, and probably more napkins, because this stuff is seriously spicy, and I'm pretty sure it's going to make everyone cry tears of joy. More chairs. He was inviting us to dinner, not as prisoners, not as defeated enemies, not as temporary hostages, as guests. Honored guests who deserved proper seating and adequate napkin supplies. Jenkins immediately began what he called emergency furniture procurement, which involved dragging chairs, stools, boxes, overturned crates, and anything else that could support weight into their dining area with the organizational efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. Rodriguez started setting places at the table, actual plates and utensils for everyone, including our soldiers who didn't even have the right kind of manipulator appendages for human eating implements. He was solving problems that we hadn't even realized we had. Don't worry about the silverware situation, Rodriguez assured everyone, while demonstrating what he called adaptive dining techniques for various alien anatomies. We've got plenty of spoons, and honestly, chili's better with a spoon anyway. More efficient delivery system. Plus I've got some specialized utensils that Jenkins designed for what he calls multi-species dining situations. They're basically sporks with extra functionality. Spoons, he was solving. Our anatomical incompatibility with spoons. And Jenkins had apparently engineered specialized eating implements for interspecies dining. They had planned for this, not the invasion part, the dinner party part. And Sergeant Murphy, this same Sergeant Murphy who had treated our arrival like a social call from interesting neighbors, was coordinating the entire operation with the casual efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. He was managing logistics. He was solving supply chain issues. He was demonstrating leadership skills that would make a galactic admiral weep with professional envy. Jenkins, can you grab those folding tables from the supply room? The big ones, not the ones that collapse when you look at them aggressively. Rodriguez, we're going to need more of that cornbread. I know your grandmother's recipe makes enough to feed a small army, but apparently we've got a medium-sized army now. And could someone please check on the coffee situation? I think we're going to need several more pots, and maybe some of that special brew that Jenkins makes when he's feeling experimental. Our soldiers, these same warriors who had conquered Deathworlds and faced cosmic horrors that defy description, were actively helping with dinner preparations. They were moving furniture. They were carrying dishes. They were asking Rodriguez for cooking tips. They were learning about proper table-setting techniques. The secret to good cornbread, Rodriguez was explaining to a group of fascinated aliens while demonstrating what he called optimal mixing methodologies, is that you've got to treat the batter like a delicate diplomatic negotiation. Too much mixing and it gets tough and cranky. Not enough mixing and it falls apart under pressure. You want it just right, unified, but not overthought. It's all about finding that perfect balance. Diplomatic negotiations. He was describing food preparation in terms of intergalactic politics, and somehow it made perfect sense. Several of our soldiers started sharing their own cooking experiences from various campaigns and Deathworld missions. Apparently, military life across the galaxy has some universal constants, including the challenge of preparing edible food under difficult circumstances. Kriegsvold told a story about trying to cook combat rations on a planet where the atmosphere was flammable and any source of heat could trigger explosive chain reactions. The trick, he explained, was using friction-based heating methods and a lot of patience. Thump shared her experience with survival cooking during the siege of Morthek Prime, where she had to prepare meals using only ambient radiation and what she called creative applications of weapon energy systems. Apparently, plasma rifles make excellent cooking implements if you know how to calibrate them properly. The humans were fascinated by these stories. They wanted to know about technical details. They were taking notes. Rodriguez, started discussing the possibility of fusion cuisine that combines traditional earth cooking with interstellar field preparation techniques. And then came the moment that broke what remained of our military discipline and sent our entire operational framework into complete strategic collapse. They said grace. Not a prayer to some cosmic war god demanding victory over their enemies, not a ritual blessing for successful combat and the destruction of their foes, not even a simple request for divine protection against alien invasion. They said a simple, heartfelt, "Thank you for having enough food to share, good company to share it with, and the opportunity to make new friends from distant places." New friends. They were calling us new friends after we had invaded their planet with overwhelming force and clear hostile intent. Sergeant Murphy's words were simple, but somehow profound, in a way that made my brain stalks tingle with confused emotion. "We're grateful for this food, for each other, for the chance to share our table with folks who've traveled a long way to be here, and for the reminder that no matter how different we might seem on the outside, we all need the same basic things: good food, good company, and the knowledge that somebody cares about whether we make it home safely. May everyone find what they're looking for, and may we all get back to our families with good stories to tell. Get home safe." He was wishing us a safe journey home after we had invaded his planet with military force. He was hoping our families would be happy to see us return. He was concerned about our personal well-being. That's when Crixville the Bone Crusher, veteran of 50 Deathworlds, survivor of the Screaming Caverns, terror of the Morthex system, warrior who had never shown weakness, in the face of any enemy, started crying. Not tears of rage or frustration, not the bitter tears of military defeat, tears of genuine emotional overwhelm, tears of someone who had just experienced something completely outside his previous life experience. He later told me that no one had ever wished him a safe journey home before. In his entire military career, spanning multiple galaxies and countless campaigns, no one had ever expressed genuine concern for his personal well-being or hoped that his family would be glad to see him. "Return. Commander," he transmitted privately, and I could hear the confusion in his voice. "I think these humans might be conducting some form of advanced psychological warfare, but if they are, it's the kindest attack I've ever experienced. I'm feeling emotions that I don't have names for. I think I might be developing what they call feelings." The dinner that followed was indescribable in terms of conventional military reporting, but I'll attempt to document it because future historians need to understand how 3 humans accidentally conquered an elite alien military force through the strategic application of homemade food and genuine kindness. Rodriguez's grandmother's chili was apparently legendary for excellent reasons that became immediately obvious. Even our soldiers, with completely different digestive systems and dietary requirements, found it delicious. In ways that defied biological logic, the cornbread was perfect, somehow achieving that ideal balance Rodriguez had described. The coffee was excellent, strong enough to wake the dead, but smooth enough to drink without medical supervision. And the conversation, oh, the conversation! It was like the most successful diplomatic dinner in the history of interstellar relations, except that no one was conducting diplomacy. They were just talking, like people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company and were interested in learning about each other's experiences. Murphy told stories about their previous adventures maintaining the base, including the time Jenkins accidentally improved their communication system while trying to fix the refrigerator, and the great ant invasion of last summer that Rodriguez defeated with strategic deployment of cinnamon and aggressive negotiation tactics that involved a lot of shouting and what he called diplomatic bribery. "The thing about ants," Rodriguez explained, "is that they're very reasonable once you establish proper communication protocols. You just have to speak their language, which apparently involves sugar-based incentives and clear territorial boundaries." Jenkins shared his theories about the mysterious connection between electronic devices and the phases of the moon, supporting his arguments with detailed documentation that he kept in what he called his weird stuff. Notebook for unexplained phenomena and suspicious coincidences. Apparently, he had been tracking correlations between lunar cycles and equipment malfunctions for several years. "I'm not saying the moon is actively sabotaging our electronics," Jenkins explained, "but the statistical evidence suggests some kind of relationship that science hasn't properly explained yet. Either that, or our equipment has personality disorders that respond to cosmic influences." Rodriguez discussed his ongoing correspondence with his grandmother, including her latest attempt to send him a care package containing enough food to feed a small army and their extended families. This had resulted in them having to rent additional storage space just for her homemade cookies, preserved fruits, and what she called emergency comfort food for difficult situations. Grandmother believes that every problem can be solved with proper nutrition and adequate emotional support, Rodriguez explained. "She's probably right. I've never seen a situation that couldn't be improved by good food and people who care about your well-being. And our soldiers, these hardened veterans of Deathworld campaigns, shared their own stories, tales of distant worlds and strange adventures, funny mishaps and unexpected discoveries, personal anecdotes about life in the galactic military, stories about their families and home worlds, memories of peaceful moments between campaigns. Chelnara told them about her home planet, where the mountains sing harmonic melodies at sunset, and the rivers flow in spirals that create natural music. She described growing up in a family of voidwalkers who taught her to find beauty in the darkness between stars. Thump shared stories about her planet's backward seasons, where winter comes in the middle of summer and flowers bloom in snow. She explained how this had taught her people to expect the unexpected and find joy in situations that seemed impossible. Krixvol, surprisingly, opened up about his childhood on Morthek, where he had learned to communicate with the crystalline death spiders by humming specific frequencies. "They're not actually hostile," he explained. "They're just misunderstood. They attack because they think we're trying to steal their crystals, but if you hum the right song, they realize you're just visiting." It was like the most successful cultural exchange in the history of interstellar relations, except that no one was conducting official diplomacy. They were just people sharing stories, learning about each other, finding common ground. Hours passed. The sun set through the windows of their simple dining room, casting everything in warm golden light that made the entire scene look like some kind of artistic masterpiece. Jenkins made more coffee. Apparently he had multiple brewing techniques for different times of day. Rodriguez brought out what he called emergency dessert supplies. Apparently his grandmother had sent cookies as well as recipes, and they were spectacular. "Grandmother's chocolate chip cookies," Rodriguez explained while distributing them, "are legendary in our family. She claims they contain secret ingredients that promote happiness and good fortune. I suspect the secret ingredient is actually just excessive amounts of butter and vanilla, but the results speak for themselves." The cookies were indeed legendary. Even our soldiers with completely different taste preferences found them irresistible. Several of them asked for the recipe. Rodriguez promised to write to his grandmother and ask if she would be willing to share her techniques with our new friends from distant places. And gradually, slowly, our soldiers began to realize something that fundamentally challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare, strategy, conquest, and the nature of military operations across the galaxy. These humans hadn't defeated us through superior firepower or advanced tactics. They hadn't outsmarted us through clever strategy or military genius. They had made us not want to defeat them. There's a vast difference between those things, and the implications were staggering in ways that challenged the fundamental basis of military doctrine. We had come here with overwhelming force, superior technology, and centuries of military experience. We were prepared for resistance, desperate last stands, heroic sacrifices, bitter defeat, strategic withdrawal, and even complete annihilation. We had contingency plans for every possible scenario, except hospitality, except kindness, except being treated like people instead of invaders, except being welcomed instead of feared, except being offered food and friendship instead of resistance and hatred. And now, sitting around their dinner table, sharing their food and their stories, learning about their lives and telling them about ours, the very idea of conquering their world seemed not just wrong, but completely ridiculous. How do you conquer people who offer you coffee and ask if you've had enough to eat? How do you destroy a world whose inhabitants worry about whether you're getting enough vegetables in your diet and proper rest between long journeys? How do you crush the spirits of beings who hope you get home safely and that your families will be happy to see you return? The answer, as Thump the Devastator quietly observed while helping Rodriguez with the dishes, is that you don't. You can't. It's not just morally impossible, it's logistically impossible. How do you maintain military discipline when your enemy keeps offering you dessert and asking about your personal interests? Commander, she transmitted privately, I believe we may have encountered something completely outside the scope of standard military doctrine. These humans appear to be conducting warfare through aggressive friendliness, and I don't think our training prepared us for this. Outside the scope, the greatest understatement in the history of galactic communication. But the evening wasn't over yet, and I was about to learn that humans have an unlimited capacity for behavior that defies logical explanation. As dinner wound down and our soldiers began what appeared to be genuine reluctance to leave, several of them were lingering over their coffee and asking follow-up questions about human culture and daily life. Jenkins made an announcement that completed our total strategic collapse and sent our remaining military protocols into complete psychological meltdown. Hey, you folks are welcome to stay the night. If you want, we've got plenty of space, and honestly, it gets pretty quiet around here. Rodriguez has been teaching me to play guitar, but I'm still at the level where I sound like a wounded space whale with severe respiratory problems. Might be nice to have an audience that's too polite to complain. Stay the night. He was offering overnight accommodations to an invasion force, military lodging, like we were travelers who had been caught by bad weather. Plus, Murphy added, apparently not content with having already destroyed our operational framework, the morning coffee is always better than the evening batch, and Rodriguez's grandmother sent instructions for her famous breakfast pancakes. Fair warning, though, they're addictive in ways that may violate several galactic treaties. Jenkins ate 12 of them last Sunday and spent the rest of the day in what he called a carbohydrate-induced state of euphoric paralysis. We had to carry him to his bunk. Addictive pancakes. They were threatening us with delicious breakfast foods that might have psychoactive properties. And Rodriguez, apparently not content with having already destroyed our military discipline through aggressive hospitality and legendary chili, delivered the final blow to our operational coherence. I was going to try my grandmother's recipe for her legendary hot chocolate tonight. She claims it's the secret to world peace, and honestly, after tasting it, I'm starting to think she might be right. It's got some kind of magical properties that make everyone feel better about everything. World peace through hot chocolate with magical properties. That's when I knew our invasion was officially over, not because we had been defeated in glorious combat, not because we had faced superior firepower or advanced tactics, not because of strategic withdrawal or tactical repositioning, because we had been adopted, completely and utterly adopted. 3 humans, 3, had somehow converted an entire alien assault team into overnight guests who were genuinely excited about breakfast pancakes, legendary hot chocolate, and the prospect of learning to play musical instruments. The final reports from my field commanders were unique in the history of military documentation and would probably be studied in war colleges for centuries as examples of what happens when military operations encounter completely unexpected variables. All troops accounted for and in excellent spirits. Morale has never been higher. Several soldiers have requested extended leave to learn human cooking techniques and musical instruments. Others want to help with equipment maintenance and what Rodriguez calls general base improvement. Projects. No casualties, no equipment losses, no strategic objectives achieved. Request permission to remain for breakfast and possibly lunch and maybe dinner again, because Rodriguez's grandmother apparently sent enough recipes to last several months. Breakfast. They wanted to stay for breakfast and lunch and possibly dinner again. And the truly terrifying part, so did I. Because somewhere between Murphy's casual hospitality, Jenkins's cheerful incompetence, and Rodriguez's grandmother's miraculous recipes, something had happened that defied every principle of military science and strategic doctrine. We had stopped being an invasion force and become friends, not allies in some complex political arrangement, not temporary partners in a mutual defense treaty, not even neutral parties in a carefully negotiated ceasefire. Friends, the kind of people you visit because you enjoy their company, the kind of people you worry about when they mention that their television reception isn't working properly, the kind of people you actually care about and want to see again. It was the most complete strategic defeat in the recorded history of galactic warfare, and somehow it felt like the greatest victory any of us had ever experienced. But here's the part that keeps me awake at night, staring at the ceiling of my command ship and questioning the fundamental nature of reality, military science, and possibly the entire structure of the universe itself. I don't think they were trying to defeat us. I think they were just being themselves. 3 humans going about their normal daily routine, treating unexpected visitors the way they apparently treat everyone, with genuine kindness, casual hospitality, and the sort of practical wisdom that makes you wonder how they've managed to survive as a species without conquering the galaxy themselves. They didn't study our psychology to find our weaknesses. They didn't analyze our military structure to identify vulnerabilities. They didn't develop sophisticated strategies to counter our tactics. They didn't even seem to recognize that we were conducting a military operation. They offered us coffee and asked if we'd had enough to eat. They invited us to dinner. They shared their stories. They taught us games. They made us feel welcome. And somehow that was more effective than any superweapon ever created, more devastating than any military strategy ever devised, more powerful than any force in the known universe. As I finish this report, my soldiers are still down on the planet's surface, apparently helping Jenkins with some kind of repair project involving what he calls the mysterious case of the rebellious microwave that may or may not be sentient. Rodriguez is teaching several of them to play guitar, despite the obvious challenges posed by their various appendage configurations. Murphy is sharing his collection of what he calls classic Earth movies. Apparently humans have an entire entertainment industry based on recording their own stories and then watching them repeatedly while consuming snack foods. Kelnara sent her last message 4 hours ago. Commander, I believe I may have found the secret to happiness. It involves proper seasoning, the judicious application of friendship, and what Rodriguez calls emotional nutrition. Request permission to extend cultural exchange indefinitely. Also, Rodriguez's grandmother has invited me to visit her personally to learn her secret ingredient techniques. I am seriously considering accepting. For intelligence gathering purposes, of course. Cultural exchange. She's calling it cultural exchange. and she wants to visit someone's grandmother for intelligence gathering. Krixvold's latest communication was even more disturbing. Commander, these humans have introduced me to something called emotional support cooking, where you prepare food while talking about your feelings. It's surprisingly therapeutic. I may have accidentally shared some classified information about our battle tactics, but they used it to help me work through some unresolved trauma from the Screaming Caverns campaign. Request permission to continue these therapy sessions disguised as cooking lessons. Therapy sessions. He wants therapy sessions disguised as cooking lessons. And Thump sent me a recipe, an actual recipe for something called friendship bread, with detailed instructions, and a note explaining that it requires sharing to work properly, and I believe this may have strategic applications for future diplomatic missions. Also, the humans have introduced me to something called group therapy through collaborative baking, and I think it might be more effective than our standard military counseling protocols. Strategic applications. She thinks bread has strategic applications for diplomacy. My entire command structure has been psychologically conquered by baked goods, genuine human kindness, and what appears to be an advanced form of therapy that involves food preparation and emotional sharing. But perhaps the most disturbing part of this entire situation is my own reaction to it. All because sitting here in my command chair, reviewing the tactical impossibility of what just happened, I find myself actually hoping that Jenkins manages to fix that microwave. I'm genuinely curious about Rodriguez's grandmother's secret ingredients and whether they really do have magical properties. I'm worried about whether Murphy's television reception problem gets resolved before the next important game that apparently involves someone called Bob getting cranky about sports-related disappointments. I'm emotionally invested in the daily lives of 3 humans I met less than 24 hours ago. I'm concerned about their well-being. I want to know how their ongoing projects turn out. I'm wondering if Rodriguez's grandmother would be willing to adopt a battle-scarred fleet commander who has recently discovered he has abandonment issues. This is either the most sophisticated psychological warfare in the history of the galaxy, or humans are just naturally programmed to make everyone around them feel like family. Either way, it's absolutely terrifying in its implications for galactic military doctrine. Command, I am officially recommending that Earth be classified as the most dangerous planet in known space. Not because of their military capabilities, they barely have any, but because of their unprecedented ability to make hardened warriors want to help with household repairs, learn new recipes, and participate in what they call group therapy sessions disguised as social activities. Any species that can accidentally defeat an invasion force with hospitality, hot chocolate, and emotional support cooking represents a threat to the fundamental structure of galactic military doctrine. They have weaponized kindness. They have militarized friendship. They have turned basic human decency into the most effective defensive strategy in the known universe. We came here to conquer a primitive world, and instead we discovered that we were the primitive ones. We thought we understood warfare, but it turns out we've been playing the wrong game entirely. We've been focusing on destruction when we should have been learning about construction. We've been studying how to break things when we should have been learning how to build relationships. These humans have shown us something that our centuries of military science never taught us. That the most powerful weapon in the universe isn't a death ray or a planet killer or a reality-altering superweapon. It's the ability to make your enemies not want to be your enemies anymore. It's the power to turn invasion into invitation. It's the magic of transforming conquest into friendship. And the most terrifying part? I think they do it accidentally. I don't think they have any idea how powerful they are. They're just being nice because that's how they are. They're sharing their food because they have enough. They're offering shelter because they have space. They're providing friendship because they enjoy meeting new people. They've conquered us without even trying. They've defeated us without fighting. They've won a war they didn't even know they were in. We have been utterly, completely, and impossibly conquered by 3 humans who think invasion fleets are just unexpected dinner guests with interesting stories to share and unusual dietary requirements.